The alarm shrieked through the corridors of Research Station, its red warning lights painting the sterile white walls in blood. Dr. Sarah Chen pressed herself against the reinforced glass of the observation deck, watching in horror as chaos erupted in the containment facility below. The children moved like wild animals, but with a terrifying intelligence that made her stomach clench. Their pale, elongated limbs bent at impossible angles as they leaped from wall to wall, their oversized black eyes reflecting the emergency lighting like dark mirrors. Sharp teeth gleamed in mouths that seemed too wide for their gaunt faces. "How many casualties?" Director Morrison's voice crackled through her comm unit, tight with barely controlled panic. 17 injured, 3 missing, came the reply from Security Chief Valdez. The containment breach started in Section C. They're moving toward the main research labs. Sarah watched one of the alien children, they called them the Cathara, drop silently from a ventilation grate onto the back of Dr. Phillips. The elderly researcher didn't even have time to scream before razor-sharp claws raked across his shoulder blades. He collapsed, blood pooling beneath him as the creature bounded away, seeking its next target. These weren't the peaceful first contact scenarios humanity had dreamed of for centuries. The Cathara had been found on a dying world, the last survivors of their species. They appeared to be children, no more than 10 years old in human terms, orphaned and alone. The Galactic Council had insisted on studying them, hoping to understand their unique physiology and perhaps save their race from extinction. But the Cathara had other plans. "They're not just attacking randomly," Sarah muttered, studying the chaos below. "Look at the pattern." The creatures moved with purpose, systematically hunting down anyone wearing a research uniform or security armor. They showed no interest in the maintenance workers who cowered in corners or the food service staff who had barricaded themselves in the cafeteria. It was as if they could distinguish between threat and non-threat with supernatural accuracy. "All research personnel, evacuate to the upper levels immediately," Morrison's voice echoed through the station. "Security teams, establish a perimeter around." His words were cut off by the sound of tearing metal. Sarah spun around to see claws piercing through the observation deck's door like it was made of paper. A Cathara child slipped through the gap, its head tilting as it studied her with those unblinking black eyes. Sarah's training kicked in. She reached for the emergency stun weapon at her belt, but the creature was impossibly fast. It crossed the 20-foot distance between them in a single leap, landing on the control console with feline grace. She expected to feel those claws tear into her flesh. Instead, the Cathara child simply stared at her, its head tilting further until it was almost upside down. A soft, chittering sound emerged from its throat, not threatening, but almost curious. "Stay back," Sarah whispered, her hand still on the stun weapon. "Please." The creature's response was to leap past her entirely, crashing through the window into the corridor beyond. Sarah heard its claws clicking against the metal flooring as it disappeared into the maze of hallways, leaving her standing alone and unharmed. 3 levels down, Marcus Webb pushed his maintenance cart through the emergency-lit corridors, seemingly oblivious to the chaos around him. At 62, the human janitor had worked on stations like this for most of his adult life. He'd seen alien species come and go, witnessed first contacts that went sideways, and cleaned up after more disasters than he cared to remember. The screaming didn't faze him. The blood on the walls was just another mess to clean up later. He'd survived 3 different xenomorph outbreaks, 2 AI rebellions, and 1 very memorable incident involving sentient space fungus. This was just Tuesday. A shadow dropped from the ceiling ahead of him. Marcus looked up to see one of the Cathara children hanging upside down from a pipe, studying him with those unsettling black eyes. The creature was smaller than the others he'd glimpsed on security feeds, probably the youngest of the group. "Hey there, kiddo," Marcus said calmly, not breaking stride with his cart. "Rough day, huh?" The Cathara child dropped to the floor with liquid grace, landing in a crouch directly in Marcus's path. Its claws extended slightly, and a low growling sound emerged from its throat. Marcus stopped pushing his cart and crouched down to the creature's eye level. "You hungry? I've got some protein bars in here somewhere." He rummaged through his cleaning supplies and produced a slightly stale energy bar. "Not much, but it's better than nothing." The growling stopped. The Cathara child's head tilted, exactly as the one in the observation deck had done with Dr. Chen. But this time the creature took a hesitant step forward. Marcus held out the protein bar. Go on, take it. You look like you haven't eaten in days. Tentatively, the Kithara child reached out with one clawed hand and snatched the bar. It tore through the wrapper with surgical precision and devoured the contents in seconds. When it finished, it looked up at Marcus expectantly. Sorry, that's all I've got right now, Marcus said with a gentle smile. But if you stick around, I might find something else later. Instead of attacking, the creature settled into a sitting position beside his cart, apparently content to accompany him on his rounds. Marcus shrugged and continued pushing the cart down the corridor, the deadly alien child padding silently alongside him like a lost puppy. In the main security center, chaos reigned. Banks of monitors showed Kithara children rampaging through different sections of the station. Scientists barricaded themselves in labs while security forces tried desperately to contain the breach. Sector 7 is completely compromised, reported Lieutenant Hayes, her face pale with exhaustion. They've torn through our defensive lines like they're made of tissue paper. What about the civilian areas? Director Morrison asked, loosening his collar as sweat beaded on his forehead. Minimal contact. They seem to be avoiding the residential quarters and service areas. It's like they're targeting specific personnel. Chief Valdez studied the tactical display, his weathered face grim. They're not just random killers. This is coordinated. They know exactly who they want to eliminate. But how? They've only been out of stasis for 6 hours. How could they possibly understand our command structure? Maybe they don't need to understand it. Dr. Chen's voice came through the comm as she made her way to the security center. Maybe they can sense it somehow. Pheromones, body language, stress indicators. Their species might have evolved to identify threats with incredible precision. Morrison pulled up personnel files on his tablet. Cross-reference the casualties with security clearances and research positions, if there's a pattern. Sir, Lieutenant Hayes' voice cracked with shock. You need to see this. On the main screen, a security feed showed an impossible sight. Marcus Webb, the station's janitor, was calmly mopping a blood-stained corridor while 3 Kithara children sat nearby, watching him work. One of them was even holding his bucket of cleaning supplies. Is this live? Morrison whispered. Yes, sir, Sector 12, maintenance level. He's been down there for the last 20 minutes with those things. The room fell silent as they watched Marcus finish cleaning the floor and move on to the next section. The Kithara children followed him like obedient pets, their earlier savagery completely absent. Get me a direct line to Webb, Morrison ordered. Now. Marcus's comm unit crackled to life just as he was scrubbing what looked suspiciously like claw marks from a wall. Yeah, what's up? Marcus, this is Director Morrison. Are you aware of your current situation? Marcus glanced down at the 3 alien children sitting patiently beside his cart. The smallest one was playing with a spare mop head, batting at the strings with its claws. You mean the kids? Yeah, they're helping me clean up. They're actually pretty good at reaching the high spots I can't get to. Marcus, those kids have killed 3 people and injured 17 others. They're extremely dangerous. Huh, Marcus continued scrubbing the wall. They seem friendly enough to me. Little one here even found a piece of debris I missed behind the water recycler. In the security center, Morrison exchanged glances with his staff. Marcus, we need you to very carefully move away from those creatures and make your way to the nearest safe zone. Why would I do that? They're not bothering anybody down here. Besides, someone's got to clean up this mess, and they're actually making the job easier. Dr. Chen leaned toward the microphone. Marcus, this is Dr. Chen. Can you describe their behavior? Are they communicating with you in any way? Marcus paused in his cleaning to consider the question. Well, they don't talk if that's what you mean, but they seem to understand what I'm doing. Watch this. He pointed to a section of the corridor where debris had scattered from a damaged wall panel. Could you guys help me pick up that stuff? Without hesitation, all 3 Kithara children scuttled over to the debris and began collecting it with their clawed hands. They brought the pieces back to Marcus's cart and deposited them in his waste container with what could only be described as pride. See, smart as whips, these kids. The security center erupted in whispered conversations. Morrison muted the comm for a moment and turned to Dr. Chen. What's your assessment? It's unprecedented. They've shown nothing but hostility to everyone else, but with Marcus, they're exhibiting cooperative behavior. Almost familial. Could it be his lack of scientific or security credentials? Maybe they don't see him as a threat. It's possible, or maybe it's something else entirely. Marcus has worked with dozens of alien species over the years. He might naturally project non-threatening body language that they respond to. Chief Valdez looked skeptical. Or he's about to become victim number 4, and we're watching it happen in real time. Morrison reopened the comm. Marcus, I'm ordering you to evacuate your current position. Head to emergency shelter Alpha 7 immediately. Can't do that, sir. Still got half the maintenance level to clean, and somebody's got to repair the damage to the air recirculation system down here. Plus, I don't think the kids want to leave. As if to prove his point, the largest Cathara child moved closer to Marcus and made a soft purring sound. The creature was easily capable of tearing him apart, but instead it seemed content to lean against his leg like an oversized cat. Besides, Marcus continued, they're starting to calm down. I think they were just scared and confused. Wouldn't you be if you woke up in a strange place surrounded by strangers? Dr. Chen felt a chill run down her spine, scared and confused. In all their research, they'd analyzed the Cathara children as specimens, test subjects to be studied and cataloged. But what if Marcus was right? What if they were just frightened children lashing out at what they perceived as threats? Marcus, she said carefully, when you look at them, what do you see? There was a long pause. Kids, Dr. Chen, just kids who have been through hell and don't know who they can trust. They remind me of my nephew after his parents died, angry at the world but desperate for someone to care about them. The maintenance workers' words hung in the air like a challenge to everything they thought they knew about their situation. In the security center, Morrison stared at the monitors showing the carnage throughout the station, then at the peaceful scene in Sector 12. All units, this is Morrison. Cease all aggressive actions against the Cathara subjects. Repeat, stand down from lethal force protocols. Sir, Chief Valdez looked incredulous. They're still extremely dangerous. Maybe we've been approaching this all wrong from the beginning. On the screen, Marcus Webb continued his cleaning routine while 3 of the deadliest creatures ever encountered by humanity helped him sort recycling and listened attentively to his running commentary about proper maintenance procedures. It was either the most dangerous situation in the station's history or the first real breakthrough in human-Cathara relations. Morrison suspected it might be both. The next few hours would determine whether humanity's first contact with the Cathara would be remembered as a massacre or a misunderstanding. And somehow, the fate of interspecies diplomacy rested in the hands of a 62-year-old janitor who saw lost children where everyone else saw monsters. The emergency lockdown had turned Research Station into a maze of sealed corridors and frightened personnel. Dr. Chen made her way through the service tunnels toward Sector 12, her hands shaking as she carried a medical scanner and a bag of supplies. Director Morrison had authorized her to make contact with Marcus Webb and study the unprecedented situation developing in the maintenance levels. Behind her, Security Chief Valdez followed with 2 of his most experienced officers, their weapons set to stun rather than kill. The change in protocol had caused significant debate among the command staff, but Morrison's orders were clear. No lethal force unless absolutely necessary. This is insane, muttered Officer Torres, checking his weapon for the 3rd time. We should be evacuating everyone and sterilizing the whole sector. Stow it, Torres, Valdez replied quietly. We've got 17 injured personnel and 3 missing. If Webb has found a way to pacify these things, we need to understand how. Through her earpiece, Chen listened to the ongoing communications between Marcus and the command center. His voice remained maddeningly calm as he provided running commentary on his cleaning routine and the behavior of his unusual companions. The little one, I'm calling her Pip, she's got this habit of organizing my tools, arranges them by size and function. The middle one, Rocky, he's really good at reaching high places. And the big guy, Duke, he's protective, keeps watching the corridors like he's on guard duty. Chen paused at an intersection, checking her tablet for the fastest route to Marcus's location. The station's artificial gravity hummed around them, a constant reminder that they were suspended in the void between stars, dealing with creatures that had evolved on a world light years away. How can he be so casual about this? Torres whispered. Experience, Valdez replied. Webb's been working with alien species longer than you've been alive. He's seen things that would give you nightmares. They reached the entrance to Sector 12, and Chen hesitated with her hand on the access panel. Beyond this door, three creatures that had terrorized the station's crew were apparently helping a janitor with his daily routine. It defied every protocol and safety measure in the book. Dr. Chen to command, we're at the access point. Morrison's voice crackled through the comm. Proceed with extreme caution. Webb, you still there? Right here, sir. Just finished fixing the atmospheric recycler. The kids were a big help. They've got really nimble fingers for delicate work. Chen input her access code and the door slid open with a soft hiss. The corridor beyond was cleaner than she'd ever seen it, with polished walls and spotless floors. The acrid smell of industrial cleaners filled the air, mixed with something else, something organic and unfamiliar. Movement ahead, Valdez whispered, raising his weapon. 50 meters down the corridor, a figure emerged from a side passage pushing a maintenance cart. Marcus Webb looked exactly as he always did, khaki coveralls, gray hair tied back in a ponytail, weathered face focused on his work. What was extraordinary was what followed him. 3 Cathara children moved with fluid grace alongside the janitor. They were smaller than Chen remembered from the containment files, but their movements held the same deadly precision that had allowed them to overwhelm armed security forces. The largest one carried a toolbox that looked comically oversized in its elongated arms. My God, Chen breathed. Marcus looked up and waved cheerfully. Hey there, Doc, Valdez, come to see how the other half lives. The Cathara children immediately tensed at the sight of the newcomers, their black eyes fixed on the security officers, and Chen could see their claws extend slightly. A low chittering sound filled the air, not quite threatening, but definitely wary. Easy, guys, Marcus said in the same tone someone might use to calm nervous dogs. These are friends, they're here to help. The largest Cathara, Duke, Marcus had called him, positioned himself between his companions and the security team. His stance was protective rather than aggressive, but Chen had no doubt he could tear through their body armor in seconds if he chose to. Marcus, Valdez said carefully, we need you to step away from those creatures. Why would I do that? We're in the middle of our rounds. The smallest Cathara child, Pip, peered around Duke's legs and made a sound that was almost like a question. She was looking directly at Chen, her oversized eyes reflecting the corridor lighting. She's curious about you, Doc, Marcus observed, probably wondering why you smell like fear and disinfectant. They can distinguish scents that precisely. Better than any species I've worked with. They knew the security teams were coming 5 minutes before you arrived. But they didn't run or hide, they just got ready to protect their territory. Chen slowly knelt down, making herself less threatening. May I scan them for medical purposes? The chittering sound returned, but softer this time. Duke tilted his head and looked at Marcus, who shrugged. Up to them, I'm not their boss. To everyone's surprise, Pip stepped forward. She moved with the cautious curiosity of a child approaching a new playground, her claws clicking softly against the metal floor. When she reached Chen, she sat back on her haunches and extended one thin arm. Chen's scanner beeped quietly as it analyzed the creature's biology. The readings were fascinating: accelerated neural activity, heightened sensory input, and a metabolism that burned energy at an incredible rate. But there was something else, something the scanner couldn't quantify. Their stress indicators are elevated, but not in a fight-or-flight pattern, she murmured into her comm. It's more like vigilance. They're alert but not afraid. That's because they trust me, Marcus said matter-of-factly. Trust is everything with traumatized kids. These aren't human children, Marcus. Their psychology could be completely different. Rocky, the middle-sized Cathara, approached Officer Torres with what appeared to be curiosity. Torres instinctively stepped back, his hand moving toward his weapon. Don't, Marcus said sharply. Quick movements make them nervous. The janitor walked over to Rocky and gently placed a hand on the creature's shoulder. This is Torres. He's jumpy, but he means well. Rocky studied Torres for a long moment, then reached out and touched the officer's uniform with one claw. The fabric tore slightly, and Torres went rigid with fear. But Rocky was only examining the material, apparently fascinated by the weave pattern. They're tactile learners, Chen realized. They understand their environment through touch as much as sight. Makes sense, Marcus agreed. Their homeworld was probably very different from this sterile station. They're trying to figure out how things work here. Duke made a series of rapid clicking sounds, and all three Cathara children immediately moved closer to Marcus. Their movements were synchronized, like a flock responding to an alarm call. "What was that about?" Valdez asked. Marcus frowned and checked his watch. "Feeding time? They get agitated when they're hungry." "Feeding time?" Chen felt her stomach drop. "Marcus, what have they been eating?" "Protein rations, mostly. Some fruit from the hydroponics lab. They're actually vegetarian by preference, though they can digest meat in a pinch." The revelation hit Chen like a physical blow. The blood throughout the station. "Defensive wounds, not feeding behavior," Marcus confirmed. "They only attacked when they felt threatened. Nobody's been eaten, Doc." Over the comm, Morrison's voice carried a note of relief. "That explains the attack pattern. They weren't hunting for food, they were protecting themselves." Pip tugged at Marcus's coveralls and pointed down the corridor toward the cafeteria. Her meaning was clear even without words. "All right, let's get you guys something to eat," Marcus said. "Doc, want to come along? You can observe their behavior in a more controlled setting." Chen looked at Valdez, who nodded reluctantly. "Stay close to Webb and keep that scanner running." As they walked through the corridors, Chen noticed how the Cathara children moved. They maintained formation around Marcus, Duke in the lead, Rocky bringing up the rear, and Pip staying close to the janitor's side. It was protective behavior, but also something more. They moved like a family unit, with Marcus as the trusted elder they turned to for guidance and security. The station's cafeteria was empty, except for a few vending machines and rows of metal tables. Marcus led them to the food service area and began assembling a meal from various protein sources and fresh vegetables from the hydroponic garden. "How do you know what they like?" Chen asked, watching him work. "Trial and error. Pip here loves the sweet potatoes. Rocky's partial to those protein cubes that taste like chicken. And Duke will eat anything, but he prefers it warm." The Cathara children settled around a table, their movements unconsciously mimicking human dining behavior. They waited until Marcus finished preparing their portions before beginning to eat, using their claws with surprising delicacy. Chen activated her scanner and began recording their behavior. "This is unprecedented. They're exhibiting learned social behaviors that suggest rapid adaptation to human cultural norms." "Or they're just polite," Marcus suggested, sitting down with his own meal. "Kids usually are when someone treats them with respect." Duke paused in his eating and made a soft vocalization that sounded almost like gratitude. He reached across the table and touched Marcus's hand briefly before returning to his food. "They're bonding with him," Chen realized, "forming emotional attachments." "Is that so surprising? They're social creatures who have been separated from their species and thrust into an alien environment. Marcus represents stability and safety in a world that must seem completely hostile to them." Through her earpiece, Chen heard Morrison discussing evacuation protocols with the Galactic Council. The official position was still that the Cathara children represented an unacceptable security risk that required immediate containment or elimination. "Sir," she said into her comm, "I'm recommending we suspend any hostile action against the Cathara subjects. What I'm observing here suggests they're capable of peaceful coexistence." "Negative, Dr. Chen. Council directive is clear. They're to be tranquilized and returned to containment within the next 6 hours." Marcus looked up from his meal, his expression darkening. "Did I just hear that right? They want to put the kids back in cages." "Marcus, please keep your voice down." "Like hell I will." The janitor stood up, his face flushed with anger. "These children have been through enough. They watched their entire world die, got stuffed in stasis pods by strangers, and woke up in a sterile prison. Now you want to drug them and lock them up again." The Cathara children sensed the change in Marcus's mood immediately. They stopped eating and looked between him and Chen, their body language shifting to alert readiness. Duke rose from his chair, positioning himself slightly in front of the other two. "Marcus, calm down. You're making them nervous." "I'm making them nervous. What about your people who want to shoot them full of tranquilizers?" Pip made a questioning sound and touched Marcus's arm. The janitor looked down at her and his expression softened slightly. "It's okay, sweetie. I'm not angry at you." But Chen could see the damage was done. The trust that had been building between the security team and the Cathara children had evaporated the moment they sensed conflict. Rocky had moved to flank Duke, and Pip was scanning the room for potential escape routes. "Command, we have a problem down here," Valdez reported quietly. "The subjects are becoming agitated." Morrison's response was immediate. "Fall back to the access point. Tranquilizer teams are en route." "Negative," Marcus said loudly enough for the comm to pick up. "Nobody's tranquilizing anybody while I'm here." Duke let out a sharp bark that was clearly a warning. His claws extended fully, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Rocky and Pip moved to flank their larger companion, forming a defensive triangle around their table. Chen raised her hand slowly. "Everyone stay calm. Marcus, can you reassure them?" "Not while your people are planning to attack them, I can't." The standoff stretched for several tense seconds. Chen could hear the Cathara children's breathing, rapid and shallow, like predators preparing to fight. Through the comm, she heard the sound of running footsteps and tactical equipment being deployed throughout the station. "This is Dr. Chen to all units," she said suddenly. "Stand down from the tranquilizer operation. Repeat, stand down immediately." "Dr. Chen, you're not authorized." "I'm the senior xenobiologist on this station, and I'm telling you that any aggressive action against these subjects will result in casualties. They're protecting their family unit, and they'll fight to the death if they have to." Marcus looked at her with surprise and something that might have been respect. "Thank you." Duke's posture relaxed slightly, but he remained alert. The other two children looked to Marcus for guidance, their alien features somehow managing to convey trust and confusion in equal measure. "Command, this is Chen. We need to talk immediately." Morrison's sigh was audible through the comm. "Conference room in 10 minutes. Bring Webb." As they prepared to leave the cafeteria, Pip tugged at Marcus's coveralls again. When he looked down, she pointed to the unfinished food on their table. "You want to take it with us?" Marcus asked. The small Cathara nodded, an unmistakably human gesture that sent a chill down Chen's spine. They weren't just adapting to human behavior. They were learning it, integrating it into their own social patterns with frightening speed. "Grab some containers," Marcus told her companions. "We're going to a meeting." Chen watched the three children carefully pack their remaining food, their movements efficient but somehow domestic. They were acting like any family preparing for a trip, not like the savage killers that had terrorized the station hours earlier. As they walked toward the conference room, Duke maintained his protective position at the front of the group. But now he also carried a small container of sweet potatoes that he'd carefully saved for Pip, and Rocky had claimed responsibility for carrying Marcus's tools. They looked, Chen realized with growing unease, exactly like children helping their grandfather with his chores. And that might be the most dangerous thing of all. The main conference room of Research Station had never hosted such an unusual gathering. Director Morrison sat at the head of the polished metal table, flanked by his senior staff, and a holographic display showing representatives from the Galactic Council. At the far end of the room, Marcus Webb occupied a chair that had been hastily reinforced to accommodate his alien companions. Duke positioned himself directly behind Marcus's chair, his imposing 7-foot frame serving as a living barrier between his adopted family and the assembled officials. Rocky and Pip flanked the janitor on either side, their large black eyes scanning the room with intelligence that made several council members visibly uncomfortable. "This is highly irregular," complained Councilor Zephyrian, his crystalline features flickering through the holographic projection. "These creatures should be contained, not participating in diplomatic discussions." "With respect, Counselor," Dr. Chen interjected, "they're not creatures, they're children, and they're demonstrating cognitive abilities that suggest they understand exactly what's happening here." As if to prove her point, Pip reached across the table and adjusted Marcus's water glass so it sat perfectly aligned with his notepad. The gesture was small but unmistakably considerate, the kind of thoughtful action that spoke to emotional intelligence and social awareness. Morrison cleared his throat. "Let's review the situation. 6 hours ago, 3 Cathara subjects breached containment and injured multiple personnel. Current casualty count stands at 17 wounded, 3 missing. However, for the past 4 hours, they've exhibited completely peaceful behavior while in the company of Mr. Webb." "They're not missing," Marcus said quietly. They're hiding in the ventilation system on level 7. They got scared when the security team started using stun weapons. The room fell silent. Chief Valdez leaned forward. You know where they are. Duke told me. Marcus gestured to the large Cathara behind him. They communicate through subsonic vocalizations and body language. The three hiding are younger, more like toddlers in human terms. They won't come out while they think people want to hurt them. Counselor Vexhai, representing the Telepathic Alliance, studied the aliens with interest. Their neural patterns are unlike anything in our databases. They appear to process emotional information as readily as sensory data. They're empathic, Chen realized. That's how they knew which personnel to target during the breach. They could sense hostile intent, fear, aggression, but with Marcus. They sense safety, Marcus finished. Same reason they trust me now. I don't see them as threats or test subjects. I see them as kids who need help. Duke made a soft, clicking sound and placed one clawed hand on Marcus's shoulder. The gesture was unmistakably protective, but also affectionate. Pip chirped in response and began arranging the styluses scattered across the conference table, organizing them by color and size. Fascinating, muttered Dr. Patterson, the station's chief psychologist. They're exhibiting nested social behaviors, individual identity within a group structure, with clear emotional bonds to a non-species member. They're also learning at an exponential rate, Chen added, reviewing her scanner data. Their brain activity shows patterns consistent with accelerated cognitive development. They're not just adapting to our environment, they're actively studying it. Morrison looked troubled. That could be seen as either promising or threatening, depending on your perspective. Counselor Zephyrian's expression grew stern. The Galactic Council's position remains unchanged. These beings have demonstrated extreme violence against multiple species. They represent an unacceptable security risk. Rocky, who had been quietly listening to the conversation, suddenly stood up and walked to the holographic display. He studied Counselor Zephyrian's image for a moment, then made a series of rapid hand gestures toward the projection. "What's he doing?" Morrison asked. Marcus watched Rocky's movements with growing amazement. "He's signing basic galactic standard sign language. Where did he learn that?" From watching the medical staff during their containment period, Chen realized. They've been observing and absorbing everything around them. Rocky just told Counselor Zephyrian that he's wrong about them being dangerous. The crystalline counselor flickered with what might have been surprise. "It understands our language." "He understands several languages," Marcus corrected firmly. "And his name is Rocky. They're not its or specimens or subjects. They're children with names and personalities and feelings." Pip suddenly jumped from her chair and scurried over to a wall panel displaying the station's technical specifications. She pointed to the atmospheric recycling diagram and chittered excitedly to Duke, who responded with a series of clicks that sounded almost like laughter. "She's explaining how the air purification system works," Marcus translated, shaking his head in amazement. "Apparently she figured out the design flaw that's been causing efficiency problems in Sector 9. Dr. Patterson's eyebrows shot up. "A child alien is critiquing our engineering." "She's got a point, too," admitted Chief Engineer Kowalski, studying the display. "We've been getting suboptimal readings from those recyclers for months." Duke approached the holographic display and began making complex hand gestures toward the council members. His movements were more formal than Rocky's, almost ceremonial in their precision. "He's requesting permission to speak for his people," Chen said, watching the graceful motions. "This is some kind of formal diplomatic protocol." Counselor Vexhai leaned forward with interest. "Grant the request. I want to hear what they have to say." Duke straightened to his full height and began a long series of gestures, his movements flowing like a dancer's. Occasionally, Rocky or Pip would add their own signs, creating a complex conversation that transcended spoken language. Marcus watched intently, his expression growing increasingly sober. They're telling their story. Their world was dying, poisoned by industrial waste and environmental collapse. The adults of their species sent the children away in stasis pods, hoping someone would find them and give them a new home. The room was completely silent, except for the soft, clicking sounds the Cathara made between gestures. The pods were programmed to land on habitable worlds, but something went wrong. They drifted for decades before your survey team found them. When they woke up in the containment facility, they thought they'd been captured by the same people who destroyed their world. Duke's gestures became more urgent, and Pip moved to stand beside him, adding her own small signs to the narrative. They attacked because they were terrified. In their minds, they were protecting themselves and their younger siblings from another round of experimentation and abuse. Marcus's voice grew thick with emotion. They weren't being savage, they were being brave. Counselor Zephyrian's crystalline features shifted through several colors. Even if their motivations were understandable, they still represent a security risk. Their combat capabilities are extraordinary. Duke made a sharp gesture, and Rocky immediately began removing tools from Marcus's maintenance kit. With precise movements, the young Cathara began disassembling one of the room's wall panels. "Hey, wait!" Chief Valdez started forward, but Marcus raised a hand. "Let him finish." Rocky worked with incredible speed and precision, his claws functioning like surgical instruments. Within minutes, he had exposed the panel's internal circuitry and made several adjustments to the power distribution network. He just increased the room's efficiency rating by 12%, Engineer Kowalski said in amazement. How did he know how to do that? Pip chirped proudly and pointed to herself, then to Rocky, then to the repaired panel. The message was clear. They had been teaching each other. They're not just adapting, Chen realized. They're improving everything they touch. Their cognitive abilities are specifically geared toward problem-solving and optimization. Duke returned to the holographic display and began a new series of gestures. His movements were slower now, more deliberate. "He says they want to help," Marcus translated. "They understand that humans and the other species in the Galactic Council face challenges similar to what their own people experienced. They want to contribute their abilities to solving those problems." Counselor Vexhai exchanged glances with her colleagues. "What kind of abilities are we talking about?" Rocky approached another wall panel and began tracing patterns in the air above it. Immediately, holographic schematics appeared, detailed engineering diagrams that showed improvements to the station's structural integrity, power distribution, and life support systems. "Predictive analysis," Dr. Patterson breathed. "They can visualize complex systems and identify optimization points instantly." Pip joined Rocky at the panel, her smaller hands dancing through the holographic display. New diagrams appeared, these focused on biological systems, showing detailed models of human physiology with annotations in a script none of them recognized. "Medical applications," Chen said. "They're mapping our biology and suggesting improvements to our health monitoring systems." Duke made a series of gestures toward Marcus, who listened carefully before nodding. He wants to know if the Council would consider a formal alliance. The Cathara children would share their analytical abilities and help solve technical problems in exchange for protection and a place to grow up safely. Morrison looked around the conference table. What about the other children, the ones hiding in the ventilation system? Duke's posture sagged slightly, and he made a soft sound that conveyed unmistakable sadness. He gestured toward the ceiling, then to his chest, then to Marcus. "They're scared," Marcus interpreted. "They won't come out until they're sure it's safe, but Duke thinks they would trust me eventually, the same way these three did." Counselor Zephyrian's image flickered as he consulted with off-screen advisors. The security concerns remain significant. These beings could easily disable our defenses if they chose to. "So could humans," Marcus pointed out. "So could most of the species in your council. The question isn't whether they're capable of violence, it's whether they choose to use it." Duke approached the conference table and carefully placed a small object in front of Morrison. It was one of his own claws, sharp as a razor and easily capable of tearing through body armor. A gesture of trust, Chen realized. He's literally disarming himself. Rocky and Pip immediately followed suit, each placing one of their claws on the table. The weapons that had terrorized the station's security forces were now freely offered as symbols of peaceful intent. Morrison picked up one of the claws and studied it carefully. "The molecular structure is incredible. These could cut through our strongest materials like butter. Or they could be used for precision work that would take our best engineers hours to complete," Kowalski added. "Look at what Rocky did to that panel in 5 minutes." Duke began gesturing again, this time directly to Morrison. His movements were formal, almost ritualistic. "He's making a formal proposal," Marcus said. "The Cathara children want to become contributing members of the galactic community. In return for sanctuary and education, they'll share their abilities and help solve technical challenges that other species face." Counselor Vexhai leaned forward. "And if we refuse?" Duke's response was immediate and clear. He gestured toward the air vents, then to the stars visible through the conference room's viewport. His meaning required no translation. "They'll take the younger children and leave," Morrison said. "Find their own way in the galaxy." "That could be disastrous," Dr. Patterson observed. "Without proper guidance, their abilities could be used by less scrupulous species. They could become weapons instead of allies." Pip suddenly jumped onto the conference table and began making rapid gestures toward each council member in turn. Her movements were urgent, almost pleading. "She says they don't want to be weapons," Marcus translated, his voice breaking slightly. "They want to build things, heal people, solve problems. They want to have friends and learn about the universe and maybe someday find other survivors of their species." The small alien child moved to stand directly in front of Morrison's chair. With careful deliberation, she removed a small tool from her belt, a device clearly designed for delicate electronic work, and placed it beside her claw on the table. "She's offering everything she has," Chen whispered. "Her weapons and her tools, everything that makes her capable of surviving in a hostile universe." Duke and Rocky moved to flank Pip, their own gestures echoing her sentiment. Together, the three children stood before the assembled officials of the Galactic Council, offering their complete trust to species they had barely begun to understand. The silence stretched for long minutes as counselors consulted and debated through encrypted channels. Finally, Counselor Vexhai spoke. "The Telepathic Alliance will sponsor a provisional acceptance. These children may remain on the station under careful supervision while we evaluate their integration potential." "The Crystal Collective agrees," added Counselor Zephyrian. "But we insist on regular psychological evaluations and strict security protocols." Morrison looked around the table at his staff, all in favor of granting provisional sanctuary status to the Cathara children. The vote was unanimous. Duke, Rocky, and Pip looked to Marcus for explanation. When he told them of the decision, their reaction was immediate and profound. Duke dropped to one knee and placed his hand over his heart in what was unmistakably a gesture of gratitude. Rocky began purring, a sound none of them had heard from the species before, and Pip simply walked over to Marcus and hugged his leg, her small form trembling with relief. "Now comes the hard part," Morrison said. "We need to convince the other children to come out of hiding and trust us the way these three trust Marcus." Marcus stood up, his three alien charges immediately moving to accompany him. "Leave that to us. Kids understand other kids better than any adult ever could." As they prepared to leave the conference room, Counselor Vexhai's voice stopped them. "Mr. Webb." Marcus turned back to the holographic display. "Thank you for seeing what the rest of us missed." Marcus looked down at Duke, Rocky, and Pip, three children who had crossed the void between stars only to find fear and suspicion instead of the hope their parents had dreamed of. "I didn't see anything special," he said quietly. "I just saw kids who needed someone to care about them." As they walked toward the ventilation systems to coax the remaining Cathara children from hiding, Duke began making soft vocalizations that carried clearly through the station's corridors. He was calling to his siblings, telling them in their own language that they had found something their dying world had thought lost forever. They had found home. 3 weeks had transformed Research Station from a sterile scientific outpost into something resembling a very unusual boarding school. The corridors echoed with the soft chittering of Cathara children and the patient explanations of human teachers trying to bridge the gap between species. Dr. Chen paused outside the makeshift classroom that had been constructed in what used to be Storage Bay 7. Through the reinforced glass, she watched Marcus Webb attempt to teach 6 young Cathara the fundamentals of human social interaction. The 3 older children, Duke, Rocky, and Pip, served as translators and cultural ambassadors for their younger siblings. The sight never failed to amaze her. Tiny, who barely reached Marcus's knee, was carefully practicing how to shake hands without extending her claws. Buzz, the most energetic of the group, was learning to moderate his vocalizations so he wouldn't accidentally shatter the delicate human eardrums around him. And Whisper, the youngest at what appeared to be the equivalent of a human 4-year-old, was mastering the art of gentle touch after accidentally tearing through 3 different textbooks in her eagerness to learn. "Progress report, Dr. Chen." Director Morrison's voice came through her comm unit. "Remarkable adaptation across all subjects," she replied, activating her recording device. "The Cathara children are demonstrating learning rates that exceed our most optimistic projections. They've mastered basic galactic standard in 2 weeks and are already beginning to understand complex social protocols." Through the classroom window, she watched Duke demonstrate proper walking pace to Zip, another of the rescued children. Cathara naturally moved much faster than humans, but Duke had learned to moderate his gait to avoid accidentally intimidating the station's personnel. Now he was passing that knowledge on to his siblings. "Any behavioral concerns?" Morrison asked. Chen hesitated. "Define concerning. They're incredibly curious about everything, which sometimes leads to unauthorized explorations. Yesterday, Whisper managed to crawl into the quantum computing core because she wanted to understand how the processing matrices worked." "Please tell me she didn't break anything." "Quite the opposite. She identified a resonance frequency issue that was reducing computational efficiency by 8%. Chief Kowalski is still trying to figure out how she knew to look for it." The classroom door opened, and Marcus emerged with his 6 students trailing behind him in a neat line. Each Cathara child carried a small tablet displaying their homework assignments, primarily exercises designed to help them understand human emotional responses and social boundaries. "Field trip time," Marcus announced cheerfully. "We're visiting the hydroponics bay to learn about sustainable agriculture." As the group passed her position, Chen noticed how naturally the human children on the station had begun to interact with their alien classmates. 8-year-old Tommy Harrison, son of the station's chief medical officer, was animatedly explaining the rules of zero-gravity soccer to Buzz, who listened with rapt attention despite being physiologically incapable of playing the game safely. "They're integrating faster than we anticipated," Chen observed. "Both species are adapting to each other." The past 3 weeks hadn't been without challenges. The first major crisis had occurred when Zip accidentally injured another child during a play session. The young Cathara had been trying to join a game of tag, but hadn't yet learned to control his strength. When he tagged Sally Chen, Dr. Chen's own 9-year-old daughter, his claws had left deep scratches across her back. The incident could have destroyed the fragile trust between the species. Instead, it had led to one of the most touching moments Chen had ever witnessed. Zip had been inconsolable, understanding that he had hurt someone he was trying to befriend. He had refused to leave Sally's side during her treatment, making soft, keening sounds that clearly conveyed distress and remorse. When Sally had finally been released from the medical bay with bandages covering her wounds, her first action had been to hug the terrified alien child. "It's okay," she had told him. "I know you didn't mean it. We just need to be more careful when we play together." From that moment forward, Zip had appointed himself as Sally's protector, using his superior strength and speed to help her with tasks around the station. The friendship between the human girl and the alien boy had become a template for integration that other children quickly adopted. "Dr. Chen to Medical Bay," came Dr. Harrison's voice through the comm. "We've got another innovation from our young friends." Chen made her way to the medical facility, where she found Dr. Harrison examining a strange device that looked like a cross between a scanner and a kaleidoscope. Whisper sat nearby, carefully arranging medical supplies, while Tiny demonstrated the device's operation to fascinated human technicians. "What am I looking at?" Chen asked. "A non-invasive cellular regeneration accelerator," Dr. Harrison replied, his voice filled with wonder. "Whisper designed it yesterday after watching me treat a patient with tissue damage. It's completely beyond our current medical technology." The small Cathara child looked up at Chen and made a series of gestures that had become familiar over the past weeks. Whisper was asking if her invention was helpful, if it was being used correctly, if there were improvements that could be made. "She wants to know if we can use it to help the crew member who was injured during the initial breach," Dr. Harrison explained. "Lieutenant Hayes still has nerve damage from her encounter with the Cathara during the escape attempt." Chen knelt down to Whisper's level. "That's very thoughtful of you. I'm sure Lieutenant Hayes would appreciate any help you can provide." The little alien's response was immediate and enthusiastic. She chittered excitedly and began making rapid gestures toward the medical equipment, clearly outlining a treatment plan that incorporated both human medical knowledge and Cathara biotechnology. She's proposing a collaborative approach, Chen realized. Human expertise in surgical technique combined with Cathara understanding of cellular mechanics. Dr. Harrison nodded slowly. The theoretical framework is sound. If this works, it could revolutionize trauma medicine. 20 minutes later, Lieutenant Hayes lay on a treatment table, while Dr. Harrison and Whisper worked together to repair 3 weeks of nerve damage. The human doctor provided the precision and anatomical knowledge, while the Cathara child used her device to accelerate cellular regeneration at the molecular level. "Sensation returning to my left arm," Hayes reported, flexing fingers that hadn't responded properly since the initial incident. "This is incredible." Chen recorded every moment of the procedure, knowing that she was witnessing the first true collaborative medical breakthrough between their species. More importantly, she was watching Lieutenant Hayes, one of the original victims of the Cathara breach, willingly placing her trust in one of the children who had been involved in that traumatic event. "How do you feel about this?" Chen asked Hayes quietly. The security officer flexed her restored arm and looked down at Whisper, who was carefully monitoring her vital signs on the alien device. 3 weeks ago, I would have said it was impossible, but these aren't the same creatures that attacked us. Maybe they never were." Whisper made a soft sound and gently touched Hayes's hand, her expression clearly conveying concern and care. The child had understood enough of the conversation to know that she was treating someone she had previously harmed, and her distress was evident. "It's okay, little one," Hayes said gently. "You were scared then, we all were, but we're not scared anymore." The lieutenant's words seemed to reach something deep in Whisper's alien psychology. The child's posture relaxed, and she began making the soft purring sound that Chen had learned indicated contentment and security. "Progress report from the engineering section," came Chief Kowalski's voice through the comm. "Duke and Rocky have completed their analysis of the station's structural integrity. You're going to want to see this." Chen made her way to engineering, where she found a remarkable scene. Duke stood before a massive holographic display showing the station's complete architectural framework, while Rocky manipulated the data streams with movements that looked more like conducting an orchestra than operating machinery. "They've identified 17 critical stress points that could lead to catastrophic failure within the next 6 months, Kowalski explained. "More importantly, they've designed solutions for all of them." The holographic display showed the station as it currently existed, then shifted to display Duke and Rocky's proposed modifications. The changes were elegant and efficient, reinforcement patterns that would strengthen the structure while reducing overall mass, power distribution improvements that would increase efficiency by 20%, and environmental controls that would make the station more comfortable for multiple species. "The mathematics alone would take our best engineers months to calculate," Kowalski added. "They did it in 3 days." Duke noticed Chen's arrival and began making the formal gestures he used when addressing station leadership. His movements had become more refined over the past weeks, incorporating elements of human body language with traditional Cathara communication. "He's requesting permission to begin implementation," Chen translated. "He wants to start with the most critical repairs first." "Granted," Morrison's voice came through the comm before Kowalski could respond. "These children have earned our trust." Rocky chittered excitedly and immediately began organizing the engineering staff into work teams. His natural leadership abilities had emerged quickly once he felt secure in his environment, and the human engineers had learned to follow his guidance with confidence. "There's something else," Kowalski added quietly. "They've been asking about other stations, other colonies. I think they want to help repair infrastructure throughout the sector." Chen felt a chill of realization. They're not just adapting to human society, they're trying to improve it. That evening, Chen found herself in the station's observation lounge, watching the 6 Cathara children interact with their human classmates during free time. The scene looked almost normal, children playing games, sharing stories, helping each other with homework. But the implications were staggering. Duke sat in a corner with Tommy Harrison and two other children, working on what appeared to be a three-dimensional puzzle. His massive claws moved with surprising delicacy as he helped the human children understand the spatial relationships involved. Rocky and Buzz had claimed a table near the viewport, where they were teaching a group of fascinated humans how to create mathematical models using hand gestures. The alien children's natural ability to visualize complex systems was proving invaluable for human students struggling with advanced concepts. Pip, Tiny, and Whisper had formed an unlikely friendship with Dr. Patterson's twin daughters, and the five girls were currently engaged in what appeared to be an elaborate storytelling session. The human children would contribute plot elements, while the Cathara children would act out the scenes with their natural grace and agility. They're not just learning from us, Chen realized. They're teaching us things we never knew we needed to learn. Sally Chen, her daughter, approached with Zip close behind. The young Cathara had appointed himself as Sally's personal assistant, carrying her books and helping her reach high shelves in the classroom. "Mom, can Zip come to dinner with us tonight?" Sally asked. "He's never tasted human food, and I want to show him how to use chopsticks." Chen looked down at the eager alien child, whose black eyes held an expression of hopeful anticipation that transcended species boundaries. Of course he can. As the evening wore on, Chen found herself documenting not just the technical achievements of the Cathara children, but their emotional development. They were forming bonds with humans that went beyond mere cooperation. They were building friendships, creating art, sharing dreams and fears just like any group of children thrown together in unusual circumstances. "Final observation for day 21, she recorded. "The Cathara subjects are not just surviving in human society, they are enriching it. Their unique perspectives and abilities are already leading to breakthroughs in medicine, engineering, and education. More importantly, they are teaching us about acceptance, adaptation, and the possibility of finding family among the stars." Through the lounge's viewport, the stars wheeled slowly in their ancient patterns. Somewhere out there were other refugee species, other children separated from their families by war, disaster, or simple cosmic bad luck. The success of the Cathara integration program was already attracting attention from across the galaxy. Chen had received communications from a dozen different worlds, each asking if the station might be able to accommodate other orphaned alien children who needed safe harbor and a chance to build new lives. "We're not just running a research station anymore," Morrison had told her earlier that day. "We're pioneering a new model for interspecies cooperation." As Chen prepared to leave the lounge, Whisper approached, carrying a small device she had been working on during craft time. The alien child held out what appeared to be a music box, its crystalline surfaces refracting the starlight into rainbow patterns. "For you," Whisper said in carefully practiced galactic standard. "Thank you for helping us find home." The device chimed softly when Chen touched it, producing a melody that seemed to combine human musical theory with alien harmonics. It was beautiful and strained, and somehow perfectly representative of what their two species were building together. "Thank you, Whisper," Chen replied. "It's beautiful." The small alien child beamed, an expression she had learned from watching human children, and scampered back to her friends. As Chen walked back to her quarters, she reflected on how much had changed since that first terrifying day when savage alien children had attacked everyone on the station except one gentle janitor. Now those same children were integral members of their community, contributing their unique gifts while learning to navigate the complex social structures of galactic civilization. Marcus had been right from the beginning. They weren't monsters or weapons or test subjects. They were just children who needed someone to care about them. And in caring for them, humanity had discovered something profound about itself, that the capacity for compassion could bridge any gap, no matter how vast the differences between species might seem. The future was uncertain, but for the first time since first contact, it felt genuinely hopeful. 6 months after first contact, Research Station had become the most requested assignment in the Galactic Cooperation Alliance. What had once been an isolated scientific outpost now served as the primary hub for the Interspecies Youth Integration Program, hosting children from 17 different worlds who had been orphaned by war, natural disasters, or the simple tragedies that echoed across the galaxy. Dr. Chen stood in the observation deck of the newly constructed educational wing, watching the morning assembly that had become a cherished tradition. 200 children from across known space gathered in the central courtyard, their forms as varied as the stars themselves. Crystalline Zephyrians refracted the artificial sunlight into prismatic displays, while gaseous nebulans maintained their shapes through force fields shaped like playful animals. Aquatic tidal children splashed in portable pools, and the insectoid hive youngsters created intricate geometric patterns with their natural coordination. And in the center of it all, 6 Kithara children served as unofficial ambassadors and guides, their natural empathy and problem-solving abilities making them invaluable mediators between species. "Assembly beginning," announced Arya, the station's artificial intelligence, which had been upgraded with Kithara pattern recognition algorithms to better understand non-human communication styles. Today's cultural exchange focuses on mathematical concepts expressed through art. Marcus Webb, now bearing the official title of Chief Integration Specialist, walked to the center of the courtyard with his usual unhurried pace. At 73, he moved more slowly than he had 6 months ago, but his gentle presence still had the power to calm the most agitated child regardless of their species. "Good morning, everyone," he said, his words automatically translated into 43 different languages and communication methods. "Today we're going to learn about harmony, not just in music, but in mathematics, in nature, and in how we work together." Duke, now recognizable as the unofficial leader of the Kithara children, stepped forward and began the complex hand gestures that had become his signature method of communication with the diverse student body. His movements were fluid and graceful, incorporating elements from dozens of alien cultures he had studied and mastered. As he gestured, holographic displays materialized around the courtyard, showing mathematical sequences found in nature: the spiral of galaxies, the branching patterns of coral reefs, the frequency distributions of stellar radiation. Each concept was presented in visual, auditory, and tactile formats to accommodate the sensory preferences of different species. "Beautiful work, Duke," Dr. Chen murmured into her comm unit. "His ability to synthesize information from multiple cultures continues to amaze me." Through the observation window, she watched Rocky approach a group of newly arrived methane breathers, their environmental suits gleaming in the artificial light. The young Kithara had taught himself basic methane speaker gesture language in just 3 days, and now he was helping the newcomers understand the day's lesson using concepts they would find familiar. Pip had claimed responsibility for the microgravitational species, tiny beings no larger than Chen's thumb who experienced the world through electromagnetic fields rather than conventional senses. The small Kithara girl had developed a specialized communication method using controlled electrical impulses, turning herself into a living translator for beings whose existence operated on completely different physical principles. "Dr. Chen," came Director Morrison's voice through her comm, "please report to Conference Room Alpha. We have visitors." Chen made her way through corridors that had been reconfigured to accommodate the needs of multiple species. Gravity panels allowed sections to operate at different intensities, atmospheric controls provided tailored breathing mixtures, and the lighting system automatically adjusted its spectrum based on the visual requirements of whoever was present. The changes had been designed primarily by the station's students, working under Marcus's patient guidance. The Kithara children had provided the initial frameworks, but youngsters from every species had contributed improvements and modifications that made the station genuinely welcoming to all forms of life. Conference Room Alpha had been expanded to 3 times its original size, with multiple environmental zones to accommodate visitors who required different atmospheric conditions. As Chen entered, she found herself facing a delegation that represented the highest levels of galactic government. Counselor Zephyrian was present in physical form rather than holographic projection, his crystalline structure casting rainbow patterns across the conference table. Beside him sat Admiral Chen Matsumoto of the Human Defense Fleet, her uniform crisp despite the long journey from Earth. Representatives from the Aquatic Alliance, the Silicon Collective, and the Psi Network completed the distinguished gathering. And at the head of the table sat an entity Chen had never expected to see in person, First Speaker Harmony of the Ancient Archives, one of the oldest and most revered beings in known space. "Dr. Chen," Morrison said formally, "please present your findings." Chen activated her presentation system, and holographic displays filled the room with 6 months of data. The Interspecies Youth Integration Program has exceeded all projections. We currently host children from 17 species, with integration success rates of 97%. More importantly, we've documented breakthrough advances in medicine, engineering, environmental science, and communication theory. She gestured, and the displays shifted to show specific examples. Whisper's regenerative medicine techniques have reduced healing times for traumatic injuries by 60%. Duke's structural analysis has improved space station design efficiency across 12 different colonies. Rocky's educational methodologies have been adopted by schools on 47 worlds. Admiral Chen Matsumoto leaned forward. What about the military applications? These children possess abilities that could revolutionize warfare. With respect, Admiral, Chen replied firmly, these children are not weapons. They're innovators, healers, and teachers. Their contributions to peaceful applications far exceed any military utility. First speaker Harmony made a sound like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. When the translation came through, her words carried the weight of millennia. The young Cathara and their companions represent something unprecedented in galactic history, a generation that thinks beyond the boundaries of individual species. The conference room door chimed, and Marcus entered with 6 familiar forms trailing behind him. The Cathara children had grown over the past months, not just physically, but in confidence and wisdom. They moved with the assured grace of young beings who had found their place in the universe. You asked to speak with them directly, Morrison said. Duke approached the conference table and made the formal gestures he had developed for addressing galactic leadership. His movements were more sophisticated now, incorporating diplomatic protocols from dozens of cultures. He's requesting permission to present a proposal on behalf of all the children at the station, Chen translated. First speaker Harmony's response was immediate. Permission granted, young one. We are honored to hear your words. Duke straightened to his full height and began a complex series of gestures that were simultaneously beautiful and profound. Rocky, Pip, and the younger Cathara children joined him, their movements creating a synchronized presentation that transcended language barriers. As they gestured, the conference room's holographic systems responded, displaying images and data that painted a picture of their vision for the future. It was a galaxy where species worked together not just for mutual benefit, but for the joy of discovery and creation, where children from dying worlds could find new homes and purposes among the stars, where differences in biology and culture were seen as opportunities for learning rather than barriers to cooperation. They're proposing a permanent interspecies youth corps, Chen realized as she watched the presentation unfold. Children from across the galaxy working together on challenges that affect all species. The images showed refugee children from war-torn worlds learning to build new technologies from their alien classmates. Young beings who had lost everything finding family and purpose among species they had never encountered before. And at the center of it all, the simple recognition that youth and innocence could bridge gaps that had divided adult civilizations for millennia. Admiral Chen Matsumoto looked troubled. The security implications are minimal, interrupted Counselor Vexai, who had just entered the conference room. The Telepathic Alliance has been monitoring the project since its inception. These children represent no threat to galactic stability. Quite the opposite, they may be our best hope for achieving true interspecies cooperation. Whisper stepped forward and made a soft sound that conveyed a question. When Marcus translated, her inquiry was heartbreakingly simple. She wants to know if they'll be allowed to stay together. The Cathara children consider this station their home now, and they're afraid of being separated. First speaker Harmony's crystalline features shifted through colors Chen had never seen before. When she spoke, her words carried a weight of decision that would echo across the galaxy. The ancient archives have observed many species rise and fall across the eons. We have seen the patterns that lead to greatness and those that lead to extinction. What we witness here represents something new, a generation that chooses cooperation over competition, understanding over fear. She rose from her chair with movements that seemed to flow like liquid light. The Galactic Council hereby grants permanent sanctuary status to all children currently residing at Research Station Kepler 442. Furthermore, we authorize the expansion of the Interspecies Youth Integration Program to include facilities on 100 worlds throughout the galaxy. The conference room erupted in excited chittering, humming, and various other sounds of celebration from the assembled children. Duke immediately knelt and placed his hand over his heart in the gesture of gratitude that had become his trademark, while his siblings gathered around Marcus in a group embrace that spoke to bonds deeper than species. There are conditions, first speaker Harmony continued. This program will be overseen jointly by representatives from all major galactic civilizations. The children's education will include diplomatic training, as we expect many of them to serve as ambassadors between their birth species and their adopted cultures. Admiral Chen Matsumoto stood abruptly. This is madness. You're talking about giving alien children access to our most sensitive technologies and information. No, Marcus said quietly. We're talking about giving lost children a chance to build something better than what the rest of us have managed so far. He gestured toward the Cathara children, who were now engaged in animated conversation with other young beings who had gathered in the corridor outside the conference room. Through the transparent walls, Chen could see children from 17 different species working together on what appeared to be a collaborative art project. Look at them, Marcus continued. 6 months ago, these kids were traumatized refugees who had watched their world die. Now they're teachers, innovators, and healers. They've contributed more to galactic civilization in 6 months than most species manage in decades. Tiny, the smallest of the Cathara children, approached Admiral Chen Matsumoto's chair and held out a small device that looked like a crystalline flower. When the Admiral hesitantly accepted it, the device chimed softly and projected a holographic display showing Earth as seen from orbit, with emphasis on the planet's most beautiful natural features. She made that for you, Marcus explained. It's a memory crystal containing images of home worlds from all the children here. She wanted you to remember that every species in the galaxy has something beautiful worth protecting. The Admiral stared at the device, her expression shifting from suspicion to wonder. How did she know I was homesick? The Cathara are empathic, Dr. Chen explained. They can sense emotional states with remarkable accuracy, but more than that, they care about the feelings of others. It's not just a biological ability, it's a fundamental part of who they are. First speaker Harmony approached the group of Cathara children, her movements careful and respectful. When she spoke, her words were directed at all of them. Young ones, the galaxy is vast and often dangerous. There will be species that fear your abilities, governments that seek to exploit your talents, and individuals who cannot see past your differences. Are you prepared for such challenges? Duke's response was immediate. He gestured not just for himself, but for all the children visible through the conference room walls. His movements conveyed determination, unity, and something else, hope. He says they're not afraid, Chen translated. They've already faced the worst thing imaginable, losing their families and their world. Everything else is just another problem to solve, and they've gotten very good at solving problems together. Rocky stepped forward and added his own gestures, which Chen interpreted as, he says that every child here has already survived something terrible, but they've learned that tragedy doesn't have to define you. What matters is what you choose to build afterward. Pip made soft sounds and gentle gestures that needed no translation. She was simply expressing love and gratitude for the opportunity to be part of something larger than herself. The younger children, Buzz, Whisper, and Zip, gathered around Marcus and began the complex harmony of sounds that they had developed as a group song. It was a melody that incorporated elements from all their birth cultures, but had become something entirely new and beautiful. As the song filled the conference room, Chen noticed that the various alien delegates were responding to the music in their own ways. Counselor Zephyrian's crystalline structure was resonating with harmonic frequencies, creating visual patterns.